Well, hey there. Good evening, everybody. Hope and pray you're doing okay this evening. I know that it says right now outside it's around 40 degrees, but it feels a lot colder than that to me for some reason. I've been chilling all afternoon. But I do hope and pray our video tonight finds you doing well. Again, we keep pressing forward, and I'm honored to be here tonight doing this with you. I want to take a moment, and I keep trying to find things to bring to you that I can do in a timely manner that makes sense, and don't always, it's hard to connect things the way we're doing this with the videos. But I'll share more of what I have in store for you in just a minute, but I want to go on the front end of it and say that I'm trying to address a pretty heavy subject tonight, but I'm doing it from a very topical view. So, but I hope it'll be enough to really challenge you to think about where we are and our nation, and you'll understand more in just a moment. Before we get started, though, I do want to bring some prayer requests to your attention. We found out yesterday that Ann Delaney's daughter passed away, and we certainly want to be praying for Ann. Many of you know her. In fact, I'm right over here on this part of the sanctuary where she sits from the pulpit. I'm on the left side over here, and Ann sits right about where I'm at. Just now thought of that, really. But we want to pray for her. Also, Joanne Burton has surgery this week. Patty Cummings has surgery this week. Vera Duvall has a procedure to be done, I think, on Wednesday. Marilyn Miller had her surgery last week. She's home and going through the process of recovery, so we want to continue to pray for Marilyn. Mike Anderson had asked the deacons to pray for his father this morning. We certainly want to continue to do that. Lucille Horton's mother had a stroke and is in Baptist Health up in Lexington, so we want to continue to pray for her. And we also want to keep Trevor and Nikki Shearer in our prayers. They had their baby, and the baby's had some issues and procedures, and so we want to keep praying for their little one. And I look at this list, and one of the things that comes to my mind is in addition to those that we know about, I also am mindful tonight of the things we don't know about, where we're not able to be together. It's not always easy to keep up with each other. And normally we do that with a weekly prayer guide and prayer service and those things. So I want to keep encouraging you, and I've been saying it the whole time, but I really want to encourage you to pray for your church family. I think Virginia Fields has had shingles. I want to remember her. I think about how the way things are, the traffic flow right now, and it's very possible that I've gone months without talking to many of you, and that's a weird place for me. I'm not that guy. I'm usually right there in the thick of things most of the time. So it's a little awkward for me to not know everything. I like, even though it's sometimes heavy to know it all, there's certainly a blessing that, when you're aware of where the church members are struggling or what they're up against, that you know how to pray for them and offer to help. And I'm just now getting back to something more of what I'd call a schedule that I'm used to. This Friday and Saturday of this past week, just yesterday and the day before, I was coughing again. Just out of nowhere, just really came back. And Saturday I felt that big lump in my chest again. I was halfway afraid that I was getting sick all over again. Today has been much better. Still got something in there, but we'll see how that plays out. If things go well, maybe I won't have to go back to the doctor. But if I wake up in the morning and certainly feel like there's a lump in there, I may be trying to get an antibiotic or something just to see, because I don't want to go backwards. It's taken too long to get where I'm at to go backwards. But those are just some of the prayer requests, and I'm absolutely 100% sure there's more. Shirley Simpson had lost her sister this past week, and she had lost another sister just a couple of weeks ago. So, 3 weeks ago, I guess. And so, and Barry Brown lost his mother. I keep thinking of the things that have come to us. And there's others, and I know that. You all, this is kind of one of those places where, me not being from here, you all probably know more than I do. I know that Mike Huffaker lost his father, Don. Mike has been a very dear friend to me, a pastor in the Freedom Association up here with Wayne Furniture, and he's just treated me like a brother since I got here. And I heard that his dad had passed away, And I know Mike and his family went through the COVID stretch themselves just not too long ago. So his plate's been really full. We want to pray for that family. And I know there's countless others. COVID has made it here to our church family. Several families have tested positive and have gone through different stages of it, really. Some folks have went through it, and it seemed like a little more than a sniffle and maybe a loss of taste or smell, something like that. But others got pretty sick with it. And so somewhere in the middle of all that is the rest of us. I know that I think I shared with you last time I spoke to you on video. One of the fellows I went to high school with, he passed away with COVID/double pneumonia. My buddy Tom Campbell, who I've mentioned by name several times, is improving, but it's taken a while. It's not one of those things you just miss a day or two of work. There's a whole lot to it. And another buddy of mine, his brother, double pneumonia after testing positive. And so everybody's, and I've yet to hear of two cases that are exactly alike. And so, and some of you tonight, even as we gather here, I know are in a different realm. And that's another thing that's kind of made things complicated, is because it's not what's being asked of everybody. It's not the same for each family. Some families have not been deterred by this much at all, and you're able to go about normal things. Others have been instructed by their doctors to stay in, don't be messing around, and that's a wide gap in what is being asked of us. And so somewhere we try to find the middle ground to keep everybody together, and we've done that the best we can. I too am anxious to start up a few things, and we'll see how that plays out. I'm hoping that we're starting to get into more of a rhythm of knowing where we are and how to go forward. I checked again my phone this afternoon. I think was it 1,700? I think I saw. So that's quite a bit from Thanksgiving week, and that's my point I keep going back to, because I remember it very clearly. 544 positive cases in Wayne County, and now we're up to 1,700, and that's not been all that long ago. So we've had this wave of spiking. And again, it's impacted some homes, and others have just gone about life as normal. And so somewhere in there, we all are, and it's kind of one of those times where we're asked to try and really be careful in how we think about things, because it does impact people, and we're all in different boats. It's not the same for each family, but you know those things. And so I offer those to you as prayer requests tonight. The situation with our nation obviously is something of grave concern to all of us, and certainly we need to be praying for the incoming president, and the condition of not just our nation, but our families, our churches. I've heard a lot more about depression. I've heard a lot more about, this when you get taken out of that traffic flow you're used to. One of the things, church is a good example. We're used to shaking hands, hugging necks, and all of that, and we've not really been able to do that really comfortably anyway in several months. And ever since I've been a pastor, I know it's the most awkward thing I've ever done is to not come up and hug somebody. I'm a hugger, I guess. I don't think of myself as one, but I've noticed now that you can't do it. I noticed how much I did in fact do it, and it's just, you just stick that hand out there without thinking a thing about it. And so, and we all learned here. We've learned at our church family as well that one case, and how these things spread and pass around has been as mind-boggling to me as it is anybody else. So, but all of that. So I give you these names to pray for, to look after your neighbor the best you can. We're working on some things too with prayer. One of our families has already got a good little blueprint going, and I'll share more about that in the coming days. But tonight I want to close out our week together, our day together, addressing something that was mentioned this morning. Brother Scott, when he was leading our music, he's been doing a wonderful job, I think, by the way. Just want to throw that out there. Scott and Tina Serber came to us, and he was just really getting his feet wet right about the time we stopped having in-person services. And yet Scott was faithful to come down, lead music. Glenn taught Sunday school. I preached to the pews. And Scott led us in song, trying to encourage folks who were home who couldn't be here. And he's just really done a great job, and I'm very thankful for Scott. He's really good at some things I'm just terrible at, and I enjoy having him here. He's a brother, and he is really just immersed himself in the calling and willing to do whatever he can to help us during this stretch. And I appreciate him, and I appreciate our deacons and all the folks who've chipped in, Sharon and Sheila playing the instruments, our sound team that gets here early and gets everything going, and Calvin has made this, what I'm doing here with this phone, about as easy as it can be done, really. He's got it to where I push a button, and when everything's working right, that's all I got to do. And he knows that this isn't my strong suit, so I want to thank him. Thank our deacons for helping with people getting in and out of the building and all the stuff they're doing. So a lot of thank yous to share. But this morning, Scott highlighted that typically this is the week, either this Sunday or next Sunday, where we observe the Sanctity of Human Life Sunday. Now, I'm kind of in the Russ Moore camp on this. Russ Moore is our president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention. He is the fellow who does a lot with the morality issues, the ethical issues, things like abortion and these things. The ERLC is what it's called. This is the group for Southern Baptists who finds themselves, from time to time invited to, the White House to talk about the things that are a concern to us as a denomination. But within the convention, there's always different thoughts. There's some who don't know what the ERLC does. There's some who are not big Russ Moore fans. I knew him from seminary. He was older than I was, and he was in the PhD program while I was working on my DMin MDiv. Sorry, not my DMin. Got my letters mixed up. But he is he's out there on the front lines with some of the hottest potatoes, as it were, that we're dealing with, the political realm and all of that. And nobody agrees wholeheartedly with anybody else on any of those issues. But the Sanctity of Life Sunday is a special observance, though. It's it's the time of the year where we stop and remember how important life is across the board. Now, normally we associate this almost automatically with the word abortion, and as you know, that is probably the most divisive issue, at least in my lifetime, thinking about the divide between political parties and right down to the individual's thoughts, and it is a very tough subject to address. It's the kind of thing where veins pop out in people's foreheads. They're already anchored into what they believe, and in some ways it's depressing for me because it's like no matter what you say, of all the things that you talk about as a pastor from time to time, this kind of issue is the kind of thing where you almost know some people aren't going to listen to you. Doesn't matter what you say. You can be a very active church member and have a very militant position about this whole subject. But I didn't want the day to get past us. I'm right in the middle of Colossians. I'm right at a part where I really don't want to take a stop just yet. Brother Coy came and preached here last week, and I really enjoyed listening to someone preach. I don't get to do that a whole lot. But I'm right in a place in Colossians where it's kind of hard to stop. And that's not to say that I don't think the Sanctity of Human Life Sunday isn't worth observing. I feel just the opposite. I'm just trying to figure out how to work it in with the schedule that we have. So what I thought I'd do tonight is take just a moment and say a few things. Nothing to ripple the water in a sense, nothing to cause the big wave or anything like that, but just to highlight where we are as a nation. When you get into some of the numbers, and I've got a wonderful little thing right here about the U.S. Abortion statistics. First of all, it's hard to find statistics that are 100% accurate. There's a lot of things that take place that we don't know about. Some states don't report their activities and some of that stuff. The numbers alone are mind-boggling, and it's somewhat of a good thing to do from time to time, where you put these numbers up for people to look at. The truth is, though, you can look at those numbers from your house. You can go to the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. You can go to the Gospel Coalition. You can go to just to your search engine and just type in U.S. abortion statistics, and these things will pop up, and they will explain the numbers. They will explain where they came from, and they'll break it down in just about every way you want to break it down. They list them by states. They list them whatever. But the numbers themselves are monstrous. And this is the that's the hard part of talking about this. The numbers are out of this world. And when you get into the global statistics, it's just mind-numbing to even think along these numbers. One of the stats that I came across, and this is, and again, I don't want to spend my time on the numbers, but just to put things in perspective, there is a conservative number, what was it, 60 million, I believe, I read, of abortions that have taken place, 60 million. And so I think the last time I preached on this, a year ago or maybe the year before, I did something with numbers to show you how big this is. And so today, in doing that again, I went back and I looked at the numbers, how big Rupp Arena is. Rupp Arena, at least on paper, seats 23,500 people. Now, that's a pretty good crowd. If you've ever been to a UK game and things are normal, it's probably pretty full. I think the ones that I've been to, very few empty seats, the games that I've been to there. But I actually did a number just to kind of put it in perspective. If you try to sum up the number of abortions, can you imagine selling out Rupp Arena 2,553 times? 2,553 home games packed to the brim, and everyone in there dying each. Now that's some way to think about how deep this is. In 9/11, a memory for all of us that just breaks our hearts when we stop and think. But 2,996 people died that day. It was on our news, and we watched it. We saw people leaping from the towers that were burning. We saw things that were just hard to watch. And even now, if you're like me, September was just a few months ago, and the video, they replay the news all day long on 9/11, and we relive it. And you can go to YouTube right now and watch it all over again, watch it unfold, and it will just sting and rip your heart out. 2,996 people. But then you come back to abortion. You come back to the loss of life, and you see numbers that are just beyond comprehension. I promise you, if 2,553 home games of Rupp Arena were invaded and everyone killed, we would never, our nation would just crumble to the ground before we would let that happen. And yet, with abortion, it continues. And I know, and one of the reasons I'm hesitant to even do this is because it would seem that the way people argue this is not about what's really taking place. It's more of a right. It's called something else. And in that way, in that vein of talking, you can talk about abortion as long as you don't, and John Piper said it this way, you can talk about abortion in our day as long as you don't say what abortion is. If you talk about abortion as a woman's right, if you talk about it as an agenda or some platform that leads to other things, you can talk all day long. But you'll notice that the bulk of the discussions really have little to do, if anything to do, with what it actually is. Now, on this note, I'm very much where I'm at. It's murdering the unborn. And I know that puts me in an odd group, but you all know me. You've been around me for 4.5 years, and some of you may be watching from other places have known me a lot longer than that. But this is, it's one of those things that because we don't talk about it or we don't call it what it is, the debates continue. And there's a lot of people, and this is one of the things that I think this has done, is that it makes us, it opens up the avenue to highlight how important life is to God. And as a Christian, it's one of the, when I started this, I talked about Russ Moore. One of the things that Russ Moore is famous for now in his term as president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission is he's wrote 2 different articles. One that why he hates the Sanctity of Human Life Sunday, and 2, this one here, entitled Why I Pray for an End to Sanctity of Life Day. Now, in both articles, what he says makes perfect sense. It's not that he hates that the church is addressing the issue and talking about it. That's not what he hates. He hates that we even have to have the discussion. And on that note, I agree with him wholeheartedly. It is a shame that we have to stop and say, maybe we shouldn't kill a baby in the womb. But our nation no longer wants to listen to, I sound like a dinosaur having this conversation. And there may be some of you who know me pretty good who may not agree with me on this, and that's okay. Pretty much have to accept it, that's where we are as a culture. Younger people are being taught a totally different view of abortion, and the words get changed up and twisted around, but there are things out there that are unmistakable. And I don't want to. I want to do this one thing, and then I'm going to move into something else I want to share with you. The overwhelming majority, and here's something to remember too. Even though the number of abortions are down each year for the last little bit, they've been going down, which is a great thing. But some of the latest numbers we have, say in 2018, just a couple years back, 876,000 in our country. That's mind-boggling. And that's down. That's down from, in 2008 it was 1,210,000. And from 2005 to 2008, that number stayed pretty much the same. In 2002, it was 1,290,000. 2000 even, it was 1,310,000. In 1996, it was 1,360,000. So we're down to, somewhere in that 860,000, but that's still a number that's hard for us to even fathom. It's a number that's bigger than we are. And no matter how we sling the statistics around, the thought of this is just mind-boggling. It's kind of one of those things you just scratch your head. And even though, like, for example, this little article that I printed up, it breaks things down into a gazillion pieces. But one of the things that I think you need to address, really, is under the heading, why do abortions occur? Okay? Now, for the most part, most people get the most heated in these discussions go to things like victims of rape and incest and those things. And if that happens, then why could a woman not do? And I understand, I really do. I do hear that. But in the bigger picture of things, that accounts for less than 1% of why abortions are done at all. 25% because someone's not ready for a baby. It's just they don't want to do it. It's not deal. Florida, who actually gives us some numbers that are a little more detailed than other states, but they single out Florida for this reason. It says the state of Florida records a reason for every abortion that occurs within its borders each year. In 2018, there were 70,083 abortions in Florida. And it speaks of the percentages of why these abortions were done. But the option in Florida is to as you fill out the paperwork about why you're doing this, 75.4% was no reason given. It was just a choice to do it. Just because. With nothing, no follow-up, nothing. I remember, I will say this and then I'll move on. I do remember a few years ago the commercials that were out there about, basically trying not to get pregnant because of what it could do to your life and those things. And I remember one of the commercials that had a young girl who was wanting to go out with her buddies but then you hear the baby crying and she couldn't because she has to stay home and take care of the baby. And so she's telling her friends on the phone or whatever it was, I can't go, you all go, I got to stay here. And one of the things that I remember from that commercial was how it made the baby the bad guy. This girl couldn't go do what she wanted to do because of a baby. And so the culprit was not anything other than the child itself. And those are things that are absolutely tough to swallow sometimes when you stop and see things presented in that way. So what I wanted to do tonight, a couple things, and both of these articles come from Desiring God. One is by John Piper. The other one is from someone else within the organization. But he talks about while we have to call abortion what it is, we can't let everybody else set it up with the language they use. The Christian position has always been that every life matters, and we live in a culture right now with Black Lives Matter and different movements stressing the importance of races and various groups. But the truth is, every life matters. That is a Christian perspective. It has always been with us. That's why racism is such a sin. When we degrade or devalue or think more of our particular race over another race, we're stepping into an arena we're not supposed to be in. So racism is sinful from the get-go, and really our appreciation for life that God has given human beings across the board addresses this. Really, it's a non-issue, but it is an issue because we have told God we like what we do, and your word doesn't help us much. And so that's why racism is out there to begin with. But when you look at it from a Christian perspective, you realize that every life does matter, every life, because there is something behind the scenes at work in the very creation of a baby. And that's where we have a falling out with a lot of the folks in our day. You know, when does this baby become a baby? When does it become a living, breathing being? When does it have a vital life? And that's where the debates rage, and that's where a lot of it gets stuck in the mud right there. Well, I'm not going to address all of that. I think from the moment of conception, something is underway that is absolutely marvelous. And having one son myself and thinking about how all that works, Nathan was our little miracle. He was just everything about him. And most parents feel that way about their kids. You can be as anti-abortion as you want to be until you have a baby. And most people, not all, but most think differently after they see the baby. Most babies in abortions are killed in ruthless ways, manners that it's hard to even talk about. The subject is that sickening. But one of the things that Desiring God put out for us was the notion of we need to call it what it is. We can't just borrow the language of the media who turns this into, in fact, it's a very brief thing. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's very short. He says, we hear the word, but we rarely hear about it. Okay, this is by a guy named John Bloom, writing for Desiring God. He said, abortion is almost always referred to as something else. It's not really discussed what it is. It's discussed as a topic, as a subject, as an act of some kind, but it's never really elaborated on. We hear that abortion is fundamentally about a woman's right to reproductive freedom, and that's what I hear most. An abortion is a litmus test for judicial nominees, or abortion is symptomatic of what's wrong with the social discourse in America. Again, people talking about abortion without saying what it is. And then the argument is that we need to come back and speak about when we're going to use the word, we need to talk about what it is. Proverbs 18:21, he quotes this, death and life are in the power of the tongue. And he says abortion is a clear example of this truth. In Proverbs 18:21, death and life are in the power of the tongue. So it's how it's discussed, how it is talked about. And he goes on to say that the killing of children can be tolerated and even championed as a social good so long as we don't call it what it really is. Call abortion an individual's right to privacy, and you can write it into the legal code. Call abortion a compassionate choice offered to a frightened person to save her future or to save a child from an undesirable quality of life, and you can swing the popular opinion. call abortion a liberation of women from the social and economic oppression of male dominance, and passionate people will march on capitals chanting demands to preserve the human right of abortion on demand. But he says what you will not hear is those people marching, chanting, we will fight for the right to kill our children. And one of the things I want to say here before I go any further, those arguments have been really shined up. They're really well laid out. This is since Roe v. Wade, 1973, the wording has become immaculate to defend the right. And so anytime a person like a pastor or someone in the Christian realm says maybe we shouldn't do that, you're infringing upon somebody, you're imposing your will into someone else's life, and you don't know anything about them, and it just gets ugly. And that's one of the reasons pastors don't do a lot with it, because they can't. Even on a Sunday morning crowd with the biggest amen bunch you've ever heard, there will be 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, or 6, or 7, or more who think that you've just stepped way out of bounds by addressing someone else's choice. And that's never, that's as sinful as it gets in American culture right now. To tell someone that they're doing something wrong is something we've lost the freedom to do. But so what I want to do, I came across, the second article is by Piper himself, and he gives something. I'm just going to read these to you. I'm not going to say a whole lot, and then I'm going to stop and let you go. I may address this next Sunday morning. I haven't really decided yet. I'm going to be praying throughout this week. I'm as passionate about this as I am anything I do. And the older I get, the more passionate I become, because I think that the arguments from the Christian side of this have been just drowned out, even within the churches themselves. That's why I said some pastors I know have been called to the carpet for even preaching on this because of a circumstance or a family or something along those lines. Our church here has been very kind. I've never been cornered for a sermon that I know of. I'm sure I've said a thing or two here or there that maybe didn't sound as good or whatever. But this is the kind of stuff that we can't be quiet about. You know, you go back, if one home game of Kentucky basketball that every person there died, Kentucky would have a day of mourning that would last forever, and rightfully so. But that has happened historically 2,553 times, and more than that. And even though the numbers are dropping, which is a good thing, it's still close. It's still 60,000. And so that's just stuff that's just hard to even process. And so what we often do is nothing. We don't say too much. It's bigger than us. The popular position that the Christians held in American government for the longest time, those things are waning. They're dying by the day. And to be a Christian now is to be the bad guy. To be a Christian is to be intolerant. It's to be filled with hate. It's all kinds of things are said about Christians now that, not all that long ago, that would not have been the case. But Piper lists what he calls 10 reasons why it's wrong to take the life of an unborn child. I'm going to read these to you, make a comment or two, and then I'm going to stop and let you go for the night. And I will spend this week praying about if I want to address this Sunday morning or not. Because, like I said, I'm right in the middle of something in Colossians. And certainly we can preach this year-round. We can do this anytime we want to. But it is a day set aside across the Christian realm to talk about it. Because when we're not talking, everybody else is. And so the church has an obligation, and I don't want to shirk that responsibility. I really don't. But tonight I thought it would be good to at least take a stab at it in the time that we have. So let's just look quickly. And again, you've got to remember where we are. The issue at hand, mostly for folks, is when does that baby become a human being? When is it wrong to? When are we committing murder? See, that's the argument. And so the argument largely from the other side is not. It's about a woman's right to choose, but it's also a fetus until it becomes a baby. And so you get into this and you see quickly how deep it goes. And certainly I'm not prepared tonight to dive into that. But let's just listen to Piper's points. I think they were good. I think they were helpful. and thought-provoking, and you and I need to be thinking people, because we are being told to believe a lot of things that we know don't jive with Scripture, and this is one of them. It just is. And I say that with all humility. I don't say this like I don't appreciate people's right to choose, and I certainly understand that and what a right that is as an American citizen. But I also know that God has a way of, if we make decisions just based on what I think is best, I go back to something very fundamental. What has the Bible said about me? I'm not qualified. I don't know what's best any more than you do. I think I do. Certainly there's things that pop up and I think I know exactly what I should do or what you should do. And you blurt that out. And then you might change your mind in a week or 2 or 3. And that has happened with young ladies who've had abortions. They get older and they look back on what they've done, and the boyfriends who were there, then they're not. There's a lot that comes with this that never reaches the airwaves, and that's something I think we don't want to forget either. But quickly, and I've spent too much time prefacing all this. First of all, the first thing that Piper points out is God told us not to murder. And you go back to Exodus and the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not murder. I remember seeing that on hand-drawn tablets growing up everywhere. I saw them on coasters. I saw them on T-shirts. I saw them. It was part of what He asked us to not do. The very notion of killing, as we understand the word in the Ten Commandments, is used. The word is used 43 times in the Hebrew Old Testament, and it always means a violent personal killing that is actually murder or is accused as murder. So there, you get into this, and there's a 1,000 ways to interpret, and people have done that. And again, murder, most people would say murder is wrong. But if you don't believe the baby is a human and it's a fetus and not a human, then you're freed up to do whatever you want to that fetus in the womb. Now, what we've done as Christian people, one of the positions the church has tried to hold on to over the years is that we believe that life begins at conception. That it's in the womb that you begin to recognize something has happened that is mysterious and wonderful. There's certainly the biological human part of it that where babies come from, but the mystery of something in the womb that will become that has this personality that's thinking, and that's the sad part. When you study this, you quickly realize that in these developmental stages of a fetus, if you want to use the word, there's a lot of consciousness in there. There's a lot of things that are already underway. Things are being processed already. And you start thinking about that. I remember in one of the great chapters of the Bible is Psalm 139. And you'll see this psalm quoted a lot in the pro-life debates because it is a very rich psalm. It's a psalm in which David describes God's intimate knowledge of Him. Psalm 139, there's a passage also in Job where Job highlights what was going on in the womb when he was created. That's a great verse that reminds us of the mystery that's going on in the womb when a person is being developed or knitted together, as Psalms would say here. And I want to read these. The whole psalm is worthy of reading, but time doesn't permit me to do that. But I do want to read what David said about his own creation, where he has given God the credit for knowing Him intimately and fully. In other words, God, you know who I am. You know everything about me. And the psalm says this as much. It says in a very opening verse, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up, and you discern my thoughts from afar." In one verse, David says, you know everything about me. And then you follow this down, and I could read all of this and it would just come to life. But for the sake of time, I'll leave some of this out. But I encourage you to read Psalm 139. And if you look down at verse 13, it says, "For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. You saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. Not only does God know David, he knows and knew what David would become. He knows everything there is to know about David. Now that's a powerful picture. That is something, and the image of God knitting him together is by design. That God in David coming into this earth, okay, a son of Jesse, and all the things that we know about David, in the womb, a miracle was taking place. God was knitting him together. And those words are critical. They're important for our understanding of how we get here. It's not just a baby being born. It's not just a fetus has developed into a living, breathing thing, okay? It's deeper than that. It's more intimate than that. God is involved in this. And so Piper comes from the position, the very first thing is we're told not to murder. We're told not to interrupt that process. It's a heavy thought, isn't it? Number 2, the destruction of a conceived human life, whether embryonic, fetal, or viable, is an assault on the unique person-forming work of God. And that's kind of what I was just getting at from Psalm 139. These kind of run together. But as life has been created, as life is being knitted together, to pull rank, as it were, to overstep into the arena of God and decide that what's being knitted together in there shouldn't be knitted together at all is a heavy step to take. And Piper's coming, this is an older article. This goes back a number of years, but he was just trying to get people to think about what, from the Christian side of this, what's really taking place. And when he's writing this would have been about the time there was 1.2 million babies or so being killed every single year in American culture. And so this is the kind of stuff when he says in Job 31, and this is the popular verse I was telling you about, where Job says this, and Job is arguing with the Lord, going back and forth. He says, if I have rejected the cause of my manservant or my maidservant when they brought a complaint against me, what then shall I do when God rises up? When he makes inquiry, what shall I answer him? Did not he who made me in the womb make his maidservant? Or did not one fashion us in the womb? In other words, the people who worked for Job, his manservants or his maidservants, the same God made both in the womb. Now, this is not incidental. Part of our belief in the Scriptures is that the Bible's inspired. Even the very words that are used are meant to convey something. So this picture of God working in the womb is not a small thing. It is not something that we can just toss to the side because we think something else is more important. This is something that is, again, you quickly begin to realize, you start thinking about these things and you realize how deep this goes. And you and I, tonight, I'm sharing this from a biblical perspective. Sort of, how does God look at humanity? Humanity looks at humanity a lot different than God does. David was looking at it from a godly position. So was Job. But most people who stand at microphones and address this stuff in the political arena are not coming from that position. They've bought in. Okay, science has said that it's a fetus until it's not a soul until it takes its first breath. And so here you can do whatever you want to it, but here it becomes different. And I've never really understood the argument of how anyone embracing that can say that here's the miracle. You're holding the baby in your hand and you're thinking, my goodness, how precious, how wonderful, how amazing. But just a few weeks ago, I could have killed it if that's what I wanted to do. And that's exactly what abortion does. It has that. It's so weird to think that you're holding this, when we had Nathan got sick right out of the womb. His lung burst and double pneumothorax, I think they called it. And I about had a heart attack. He was fine, then he wasn't. Spent a few days in the NIC unit, getting his breath, getting his lungs repaired. All that stuff was going on. And the moment I laid eyes on him, He was a miracle from the get-go, And when he was sick, we were barely breathing ourselves, not knowing where this was going to go. But when I read something, I think about the arguments of today, and I'm thinking, according to many out there, the beauty is not the baby. The beauty is that I chose to have the baby, that Chris and I decided not to abort it. But it's great that we have a baby, but it was our choice. See, that's more important than the actual little miracle you're holding in your hands. And I think that's silly, but that's me. And I'm not trying to, start a war here. I just want to tell you where I'm coming from. Number 3, aborting unborn humans falls under the repeated biblical ban against shedding innocent blood. That phrase is used several times, some 20 times in the Bible. It's brought up, the shedding of innocent blood. And the most perfect definition of innocent, at least as we understand the word, is the baby in the womb, before the first word has been uttered. And so that's not a small thing. The Bible has a lot of references telling us to look after the refugees, the widows, the orphans. And all of this falls under the sanctity of life itself. So these other things that we're talking about, the refugee, the widow, the orphan, those it's about the quality of life. Their life is worth something. Black Lives Matter is not the answer. The Christian perspective is the answer, because we recognize that all life has value. Not one race above another race. It doesn't work that way. That it's not supposed to work that way. And so here we are thinking about these things tonight, trying to get it in our minds. So we look at the world and we see what it's become. It's a world trying to maintain some kind of equality that's kicked God right out of the equation. Christians should be leading the brigade against racism. We should be the ones out there really saying, hey, this is not right, because we see the value of a soul. Brother Coy talked about this last Sunday morning when he preached here. What kind of value do you put on one soul? You can't. The number is an astronomical way to even think about how valuable a person is. Especially when you come from the position of the Christian, the eyes of God, one who's been created, an image bearer. And that's something a lot of Christian writers talk about. A baby is an image bearer of God, and you want to kill it. Number 4, the Bible frequently expresses the high priority God puts on the protection and provision and vindication of the weakest and most helpless and most victimized members of a community. And no one is more helpless, more weak, more in need of protection than an unborn baby. Number 5, I'm going to go quickly. I went longer than I meant to. By judging difficult and even tragic human life as the worse evil than taking life, abortionists contradict the widespread biblical teaching that God loves to show His gracious power through suffering, and not just by helping people avoid suffering. Now, that's a big, long way of saying something very, very simple. It might look from weighing things out that this baby would be better off not to be born at all than to enter into this world with everything that's going on. But here's what we leave out of that equation. Here's why that doesn't hold up. God is greater than we are. You sit here, when you have a baby or you're pregnant, you immediately start wondering, okay, where's this going to go? Okay? But one of the things we fail to factor in is how God is able to do the miraculous over and over again. God teaches us things even when our babies are sick, even when they're not perfect, when they have health issues. We learn things. We learn valuable things. And that's not a small thing to ignore. That's not a little thing, okay? We tend to, some of our TV preachers would have us believe God doesn't intend for us to ever have a hardship, and that's crazy. That is absolutely unbiblical and as silly as it can be. It's embarrassing that people believe that. We're at a place in history where humanity has fallen. We're in need of redemption. Sin has caused things to even our physical bodies. But God in His grace, working in situations that are, we would write off and say, this is just, we can't do it. And yet there are countless testimonies out there of God being absolutely incredible to families going through even the hardest of circumstances. And I think it's fair to say, too, that when we go through those hardships and the things that are absolutely difficult, we learn things that we would never learn otherwise. You show me a good, faithful saint, someone who's really walked with God 40, 50, 60, 70 years, and you're not going to look back and see a perfect life. You see someone who's anchored in their faith, and you'll see someone who's actually tripped, fallen down, been in impossible situations, who's been as high as the clouds and in the lowest part of the deepest valleys, the highs and the lows, and through it all, they hold to faith. They hold on to Christ, and you see them mature and strong and not fazed by the hardships. And so just because having a child might be a hardship, it doesn't mean God ceases to be God. Maybe God teaches us things in those hardships that we would never learn otherwise. I know that's not as pleasant as hearing what Joel Osteen or anybody else would say about how we should never, ever, ever have a hardship. But I think it's biblical, or I wouldn't say it. Number 6, it is a sin of presumption to justify abortion by taking comfort in the fact that all these little children will go to heaven or even be given full adult life in the resurrection. Okay, and that's a kind of a heavy thing to say here, but the point is simply this. If you say, well, the baby's better off, at least if it's not born, it goes to heaven, soul goes to heaven, and there's some kind of peace derived from that. That's really not your call to make. That's Piper's point. That's really not a good argument, because you step into the very footprints of God himself and you try to play God, and we're not equipped to do that. That's not our choice to make at all. And this is one of those things you have to stop. He goes, our duty is to obey God, not to play God. We are to obey, not play. I thought that was a pretty good little summary. Number 7, the Bible commands us to rescue our neighbor who is being unjustly led away to death. Proverbs 24, 11 and 12. Rescue those who are being taken away to death. Hold back those who are stumbling to the slaughter. If you say, we did not know this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who keeps watch over your soul know it? And will he not require man according to his work? In other words, you can't say you didn't know better. When you know someone's being led to death and you do nothing, you can't claim you didn't know. And again, wordsmiths can make abortion sound like it's just the most logical, common sense thing you can do. And you can come up with a million reasons to say that this is somehow better for somebody. But it comes at a great cost. And it's a call that I don't think we're supposed to make. And I realize not everybody's watching this is going to agree with me on this, but I think Piper's points are making me think. Number 8, aborting unborn children falls under Jesus' rebuke of those who spurn children as inconvenient and unworthy of the Savior's attention. Anyone who knows anything about the Gospels realize quickly the attention Jesus gives the children. They were in a place of helplessness. They were in a place of being stepped over. Their voice didn't matter. They come to Jesus. The apostles get a little upset and say, get these kids out of here. And Jesus says, don't say that to them. Let them come. And if you're really a Christian, that picture of the importance of children sticks with you, especially when you're a child. You hear that hey, children often feel like they're in the way of everybody when they're growing up. We've all been told to go to our rooms. We've all been told to get out of here. We've all been told to go outside, go inside. You're in the way. And Jesus says, let them come to me. Children and adults love that picture. Number 9, it is the right of God, the Maker, to give and to take human life. It is not our individual right to make this choice. And number 10, finally, saving faith in Christ brings forgiveness of sins and cleansing of conscience and help through life and hope for eternity. Surrounded by such omnipotent love, every follower of Jesus is free from the greed and fear that might lure a person to forsake these truths in order to gain money or avoid reproach. And that's basically a calling for all of us to do the right thing. When we know who we are in Christ, we recognize His scope of grace and forgiveness. Be thankful for it. Value it. And that also has a ring of us when we know of someone who's went through an abortion, and there are those out there who are who've gone through an abortion, and they're trying to get their legs back. It's really one of those things where we have to stop and remember the grace that's been shown us so we can forgive and so we can help somebody. The church ought to be a place where your sins are not poured on top of your head, but you are reminded of a gracious Savior that we have. And so you're able to talk about things and help people get their legs back when they have fallen. And sometimes the church isn't good at that. Sometimes we just pile on when someone's down. We just drop kick them and pile on, pile on. But if we understand the grace that God has given each of us in saving our souls, we recognize the value of being gracious to other people. And so what a way to think about. And again, this goes deeper than we know. And again, I'm just scratching the surface tonight in the video, and I'm probably going to look back tomorrow and think, what was I thinking, even addressing this in a video? But I certainly didn't want the day to go by without you hearing something from me on this. And a lot to pray for our nation. Again, this is just one of a million issues, but this has been a very big issue for a number of years, and it will be in the future. And so Christians need to really decide where we stand on this, and stand and hold our ground. These days, convictions are tossed to the side for little or nothing, and may God be gracious to us and help us to get our backbones back because they are so needed. Well, I love you guys. Thank you for watching tonight. If you're able to do that, I appreciate it. This again, I may be preaching on this Sunday. We'll see how it goes. I got a lot to pray for, got a lot to do this week, so we'll see how things work out. But I hope and pray you're well. Thank you for your time tonight. God bless you. Have a great week. I love you guys.